can I still feel grounded in these belief systems and entertain other ideas?
Finally, they sent me to prison. That was it for me. From that point forward, I will do whatever it takes. This is not the life that I want.
This is a thinking disease with a using problem. They're not bad people learning how to be good. You're sick and learning how to be well.
Hey everybody, this is Doug Pfeiffer from Life and Purpose Behavioral Health. Welcome to another episode of Therapy Talk. Today we have Janice McFarland, Director of Clinical Services, and we decided that, you know what, we want to be better communicators ourselves and that we should talk about communication because we think it is really a big piece of mental health and wellness. Today and future segments, we are going to be talking about the complicated world of communication. So today we're going to get the conversation started. Hope you enjoy the episode. How much of a role does communication play in mental health problems?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that communication, poor communication, good communication, however you want to talk about it, I would say that if you don't have good communication with the people around you, whatever problem you have is made worse or exacerbated by the fact that you don't have clear, good communication pattern with the people in your life. So if you're having some depression, if you're experiencing anxiety, if you have a substance use disorder, and you previously didn't have good pathways of communication with the people in your life, it makes it even harder to reach out for help. It makes it even harder to explain to people what's going on with you and why you need help or the kind of help that you need. And I just think that in a lot of ways, our lack of communication, our lack of good, healthy communication skills that are being taught are contributing a lot to like the suffering that people experience. You know, you and I had talked previously about like pain is inevitable, but suffering is not. Right. And the way that we talk to ourselves about our pain has a lot to do with the actual physical experience of our pain. Mm-hmm. And to me, communication is a big part of that because communication is that self-defeating narrative that may exist in your mind that creates more pain within yourself. Communication with another human being is just the outward form of what you have going on in your head.
Communication contributing to mental health problem. In for example, like, you know, if you talk to maybe if like couples counseling or whatever, it's like, I don't feel listened to, or, you know, one of the things if you talk to kids growing up is, you know, the one thing that parents do is they don't listen. Communication is designed to be a two-way street, but maybe typically treated one way. So like I have an agenda in my conversation with you. I want you to do something for me or accomplish some type of task or do some type of goal. And maybe you have an agenda on your end. And so then they can be very conflicting and butt heads, or maybe you're trying to have kind of a two-way street and I'm only wanting to go in one-way street. And so then I walk away from these conversations rejected or dismissed.
Yeah. I mean, I think you and I were talking about that yesterday a little bit, you know, with that Dax Shepard podcast that you were listening to, where he was trying to explain to Kristen in this very like backwards beat around the bush type of way about what he needed from her. And when he finally was like, Kristen, I need your attention, like that's direct communication. I think there's this misconception that direct communication means that you're stating something unpopular or unpleasant. And that's no, direct communication is just, I'm not going to beat around the bush about what I need from you or what I'm noticing, what I'm recognizing. The other thing that we were talking about last night, actually, at the group LPC supervision that I facilitate every week related to mental health and communication, is that we feel like a lot of the words, a lot of the clinical words that we use in our field have kind of been co-opted by other things. So depression, bipolar, anxiety, a lot of the vernacular, the clinical vernacular that we use to communicate with people about what they're experiencing. You know, one was bringing up that everything is a trauma to one of her clients. The other thing is, oh, I was so depressed yesterday. How long did it last? Oh, just a couple hours. That's actually just, that's a period of sadness. Depression is a clinical term. And so I feel like the English language will always be evolving and changing. We can't ask for it to be static. That's not the way the English language is designed. And I think that's something else to keep in mind too. Like, we can't expect other people to always meet us where we are at communicatively. And so we have to give that same grace to other people. Like, I think in 2020, Webster's Dictionary changed the definition of the word literally to include the way that we use it in language, which actually means figuratively. So we don't even have a word for literally anymore, the way that I was taught it growing up. There's two definitions in Webster's Dictionary. And so understanding that communication changes, the words that we use change. We can't expect somebody to slow down or speed up because that's just being very selfish. Communication, like you said, is a two-way street. If my communication is always about me, I'm not really seeking communication.
Mm-hmm.
I'm seeking some other type of validation or approval, maybe from other people.
Because I mean, the thing is, like, being direct doesn't necessarily mean being aggressive.
Yeah.
It just means that you're able to communicate what you clearly need or wanting. Like you're, like you said, not beating around the bush. So you're able to kind of say it in a way that people can kind of understand.
I feel like that's where a lot of people get themselves into trouble. Like within whatever the context of their relationships is with people, is that they try to use metaphors or similes or questions or things like that to get the opinion or feedback of some of the other person in the relationship, friend, romantic, parent, child, whatever. We ask a question and then we make an assumption based on that person's reaction, but they don't know that we are coding that as a belief on the part of the other person. And so assuming that we know how people are going to respond to things based on previous circumstances where we weren't really direct in asking them a question about something creates a lot of heartache and a lot of struggle for people and their relationships. I've seen that so many times. Well, I know that they will be upset with me for this because they said this on this day 2 years ago when something else had happened. And cognitive distortions and cognitive thinking errors, we will get into in a later segment in more detail. But that mind reader thing that we all do as people, I don't know why we do it.
Well, I think it's, what you're describing is that we're bringing, like, my interaction with you today is not a new experience. So to the brain, nothing is really a new experience because we're filtering this through our previous experience. So my relational history is being brought to this table, and my relational history with you is being brought to this conversation. Just the same for you. You have, a relational experience with me, and that plays a role. Now, certainly if you didn't meet some need of mine in the past or upset me about something in the past, then maybe my brain is jumping to this conclusion that you're going to do the same thing, even though that day that you might not have been able to do something that I was wanting, or you maybe upset me, could have been a day that you had a lot of things going on, or you just found out some really terrible news, or whatever. We just kind of assume that every situation is the same thing, and we're not really kind of understanding, okay, we need to kind of learn more about what's going on and understand why things didn't work one time but are different the other.
That reminds me of a situation within the agency that we had in 2020 in one of our clinical departments. The communication within the team wasn't the way that we wanted it to be. And the way that you're talking about relational history, and you and I have a relatively positive relational history. There wasn't a lot of relational history within the team, and the relational history that people did have wasn't necessarily positive. There was a lot of errors there, a lot of communication errors, and the only way to solve that, every individual member of the team had been coming to me and sharing their frustrations and their concerns, but nobody was really willing to directly and frankly talk with each other about the things that were going on. And so, for a while, I was just running myself ragged, trying to check in with people individually, one-on-one. And as their supervisor, I was privy to, information from one that another didn't know. And it was just very stressful for me. And I also saw that this department that had run pretty well before was really struggling to find its vibe, to find their relational
Rhythm.
history with each other in a positive way, and to kind of exercise the demons of what they hadn't been doing well communicatively. And so we made a decision to sit down at the table together. Well, they didn't know that they were making a decision. I made a decision to have them sit down at a table. And I just kind of laid it out. I said, here's what's up, you guys. You all have come to me concerned about the same issue. I am also concerned about this issue. However, I cannot solve this issue. The solution lies within you.
Right.
Let's put on the table what has made us feel unsafe, or what has kind of burned us, like, toddler on a hot stove. What's kind of burned you that makes you feel not relationally safe in this team when it comes to communication? And let's see if we can unpack and clarify everything. And it was the beginning of an extremely healing, tremendously bonding experience for that group of professionals working together. And I think that's kind of what we're missing a lot of times in life, is your supervisor, your me, to gather all of the parties that are having a hard time, but want things to be better, and be like, everybody, listen. Let's openly talk about what's going on. We may hurt some feelings today, but that's okay.
But that brings me up to kind of like, it just popped in my head when I was thinking about what you were saying, is what role do negative emotions play in our life? Why would we have negative emotions if they were not for some purpose?
Exactly.
I
feel like those negative emotions, I feel like, are really misunderstood. Do you think that too? Like
Yeah.
the presence of negative emotions that don't make our body feel pleasant or happy or good. Because that's what we're talking about. You and I have talked about this a million times. It's not the emotion we want to get rid of. It's the way that the emotion makes our body feel.
The uncomfortable sensations. But there's also this belief that when we are knee deep in the negative emotion, the physiological discomfort that comes from feeling sad or angry or whatever, it's going to last forever. That it's like never going to go away. And so you go into terrible crisis. Your group that you're talking about and their success in communication doesn't happen without discomfort.
Right.
Like it doesn't happen without negative emotions. It doesn't happen without me being like, I don't like the fact that person said that.
Yeah.
Or that person's doing this, or they're not coming to me about something or whatever. And so.
And that was a part of that first conversation where I told all of them, I said, this is an extremely uncomfortable conversation.
Yeah.
This is very uncomfortable. This is not a normal thing, but you are going to say things today that should upset somebody else. But that's okay, because we are all going to make a decision right now that no matter what anybody else has to say, this meeting, this conversation is about getting all of our stuff out on the table so that we as a group of people can put together a plan to get to a better place, because you all have independently come to me and told me that this is not a place that you want to remain.
Right.
I can't put together a plan for you. If you are not involved in the solution, it's probably not going to work.
Yeah.
So trust enough. And that kind of like mediator position that I played, I feel like so many people are missing in their lives. And especially, we were talking about power differential in relationships yesterday. That's a huge barrier to positive communication patterns. If you are interacting with someone that you do not feel safe to clearly and directly communicate with, that's a huge barrier to overcome. And so to have their boss be the mediator and say, I don't care if what you say hurts my feelings, hurts the person to your left or your right's feelings. This is a safe space. We have got to build a positive relational history where we can talk about uncomfortable things and come out on the other side and still be a team together. We have to start building that. To have their boss say that it was okay to do that was nice, because they knew there wasn't going to be retribution. But there isn't that safety in every one of these situations that people find themselves in, where they need to say uncomfortable things to people.
Well, I mean, in the ironic or funny thing about it is that people that are not like employees listening to this would probably laugh that, wait, the professionals have these issues and that they might have some breakdowns in communication, but
oh yeah, funny.
So like, even though we try to help people in improving communication, it's always a work in progress, and we have to kind of continually self-reflect, So if I am upset because you said something, why am I upset? Why did that bother me so much? Because behind that is probably a valid concern and something that's probably actionable. Like kind of that example with Dax Shepard is, I just want you to spend time with me, paying attention to me. And that's an easy, actionable thing, whereas originally he's asking for her to, start working on time management skills and things like that are not really very easily actionable.
Also, like,
'cause
who
they're
are
not
you,
very
my
concrete.
dad? Like, you're
Right.
supposed to be my husband, Dax.
Right. So, and I think that communication is, do we even clearly know what we want?
Oh my gosh, and that is that is another barrier for people. I can't tell you how many clients I've talked with, and I'm like, listen, on the days that you know what you need from people, it may not be a day that you're in a depressed state. But if on good days you have examples of things that you would like a significant other to do for you, or an important person in your life, please share that with them, because they are equally as clueless as you. And I'm not telling you that you have to know how to solve all of your problems, but pay attention to the things that work and share those with people around you when you feel able to do so. Because, I mean, if people knew what they needed, we would be out of a job real quick.
Right.
So, and I think a lot of that comes from fear. We don't want to be wrong. What if this isn't what I need? What if I'm supposed to be doing something different? What if there's something better for me or someone better for me? There's always this self-doubt.
Or I ask for this, or I communicate my need correctly and you say no, or you were going to say, I don't care, or you're going to reject me for having that need, or I don't want to be there's a lot of layers to this onion. If I need something from you, then I'm weak. And so I'm not going to communicate just because I don't want to appear weak.
Right.
You can't have a relationship with someone if it's not a collaborative effort, if it's not something where we are feeding off each other, learning to cohabitate. I mean, all this stuff is really complicated.
Well, and outside of that, I mean, if you finally get yourself to a place where you know what you need and you know what you want, and there is someone for you to communicate that to, there's a question of worthiness. Am I worthy enough to ask for this thing? And if they say no, what do I do about that? Do I walk away? Do I drop my expectation? What do I do? That's really scary for people.
Are we flexible enough to solve a problem?
Mm-hmm.
So if I stand firm on this is the only way it can be. I mean, this is why our world is in such disarray. From a very global perspective, it's this or that. It's only this, only that, no collaboration on issues. So, people are panicked, freaking out because of their needs are not going to be respected.
I think another problem that we have right now in a larger scope is that most people are communicating to convince and not communicating to understand.
Sure.
So, not going to get into politics today, dear Lord.
Oh,
but
no?
That is the easiest kind of example. We have people who
it is
identify
role
as
modeling.
What?
It is role modeling a style of communication that is not very helpful.
Yes.
So
Yes, it is. We have people over here and we have people over here, and the idea of a debate has been proven to not actually be helpful at changing people's minds. It just further entrenches you in your own beliefs, because we're looking to justify our position. We're not approaching other people and other human beings with a lens of understanding or recognizing them as humans. Sometimes we see them as an enemy. We see them as the opposer of what we want, what we need, what we think is right, what we think is wrong. And that's a really dangerous way to view other human beings. Like, we're all human. Like, to kind of go back to the thing that you said about, oh my gosh, like my team of professionals doesn't communicate great all the time. No. You know why? Because we're human beings. We are human beings and we are flawed and we have emotions and we don't always take care of them the best way. And every person that you interact with should be given the same grace. We are all human beings and we are all fallible.
Well, and I also think that we are on autopilot most of the time. So I think what people
especially with this past year.
Right. And so I think what people should understand is that the reason why we need communication is because the brain likes to operate in autopilot, so it doesn't have to because it's trying to do so many things, so it doesn't want to spend a lot of time being in conscious thought 100% of the time, so it has to have those opportunities so we have these habits, we have these behavioral templates, and that's how we operate. And so sometimes someone needs to get us out of autopilot so that we can say, you're flying this plane into a mountain. You need to avert course and find a different path because the way we're doing this is not working. And we're clarifying because, there are times where we don't think of everything. We don't recognize, this thing needs to be addressed and we can't address it by doing it this way. We don't pay attention to kind of the toll it might take on other people to operate in a certain way or behave in a certain way. And, so I just think autopilot is, a necessary, thing for us, but it can also cause problems. And so that's often what therapy is okay, let's recognize our autopilot courses of action, and we have to kind of snap people out of autopilot so they can make change.
Just last week, I had to personally snap myself out of autopilot through some very direct communication with people who I trust and I know support me at work. I was on autopilot for the longest time. Get done what's directly in front of you. And then we can think about other things. And all of the things that we talked about, worthiness, fear, lack of skills, asking for help is weakness. All of that was up in my brain. But I recognized I am flying into a mountainside at a very quick velocity. And if I don't use the resources around me, I'm going to fail. So I found people who I trusted and I knew cared about me and could help me solve my problem, told them what was going on, asked for feedback, and then we put together a plan that took care of everybody's needs, respecting boundaries, respecting everybody's, desires, wants, skill levels, all of that. We put together a plan. We can be a more effective team and help each other without one person feeling too overloaded.
Right. And there's probably some benefit to that, to where maybe there was somebody in your circle that was like, I really would like to help. I would really like to take on some things.
That's exactly what they said. What they said. They were just like, I'm fine. Yeah. We know that you have other things that you're working on. This stuff that you're worried about, don't worry about it. We've got this. It's fine. Right. But I don't want to put extra work on people, that kind of almost superhero, you can do everything all the time perspective that some of us workaholics tend to have stashed away. I had to make a decision that I was ready to let go of that in this very specific one instance. I'm not trying to say that it's gone. But communication is something that everybody struggles with. There is not a person on the planet that communicates 100% effectively all of the time. That person doesn't exist. And if they do, I would like to have a conversation with them to understand how they do it.
They probably don't do it often, so that they don't have to. We're bad predictors, so we try to predict things, and so that kind of gets in the way. So we're predicting, I can't do this because all hell will break loose, and everybody will fall apart if I don't do this or don't do that, or if I try to talk to you, it's going to go bad, or she's just she's going to react this way, or he's going to react this way, and it's not going to go well. And we have all these things running through our head. And they're very it's that brain is negative by nature.
Not only that, like you were talking about before, human beings are not static. Every day things happen that change us in slight ways. They change our view, our perspective, our way of thinking in slight, small, maybe ways that people don't notice or recognize. So for me to make an assumption or a prediction about how somebody is going to react based on an interaction I had with that person a couple months ago, a year ago, I'm going to predict incorrectly. Right. Because I don't know how you're thinking today.
You were in a different place, or that person was in a different place, rightfully so. And there's millions of experiences that this person has had since that couple month ago conversation that, or they've had multiple other experiences with you that might change even their approach or understanding of you. So when you come back to that same problem, it's not that big of a
And I feel like one of the biggest barriers, like if we talk about cognitive distortions and thinking errors, is that assumption, mind reading, where we don't communicate because we think we know what the other person is going to respond to us with.
Right.
I think that is probably the number one offender in our heads that stops us from communicating with other people.
Well,
outside of all of the other like fear and unworthiness and stuff. I think that's the thought, I think, a lot of times that shuts down the words from being able to come out of your mouth. Oh, well, I already know how they're going to react.
Right. Yeah. And I guess can be self-protective because we're fearing that rejection. And so then it comes to question is, okay, let's run that story through. You say this to them and they reject you. Doesn't mean that you shouldn't have communicated it. It just gives you new information and doesn't mean that you can't work through that. I kind of equate it to my kids, like when they want something and they go, well, I asked nicely. I mean, well, just because you ask nicely, I want you to ask nicely because I want you to communicate effectively. That doesn't mean that I give you everything you ask for.
Just because you say please doesn't mean that you get a cookie every time.
So just because I communicate and use the appropriate communication skills I learned in therapy with Janice doesn't mean that everybody's going to respond to the way that you're going to respond. However, you are most in control of yourself than anything else. So how do you want to be? What kind of person do you want to be? How do you want to operate and behave in life and all those types of things? So do you want to be a better communicator, or are you just really focused on everybody being persuaded by you to kind of do those things? So, that's... Do you
want to be a better communicator, or do you want to be a better manipulator? Those are two different things.
Right. Because I can't control whether people are going to do things. I mean, there's been so many experiences that I can go into this year of trying to convince people to do something a certain way and being blocked in many of those opportunities. I can't control, even though I think I have the best argument and putting all the right information on the table, I still can't control whether they're going to say. And in fact, oftentimes when I think someone's going to react in a negative way, in a way that I don't like, or, worst case scenario, it is often the opposite. They don't. And I'm surprised, time and time again, whereas sometimes I'm overconfident and going, they're totally going to agree and do it. And then I find out that it's not that way.
One thing that I've learned very clearly in 2020 through some personal exploration, control in any form is an illusion.
Sure.
Outside of yourself. You really can't control anything. We can't control the weather. We can't control the reaction of the people around us. We can't control anything. Like the idea of control, that I could control somebody, is an illusion. It's not real. It's this really unhealthy ego boost that we keep around because it feels good to feel like you're in control of things outside of yourself. But accepting that the only thing I have control over is myself and how I respond to things that happen around me has given me, I think, a lot more headspace, a lot more ability to think critically about things, because I'm not feeling emotionally triggered by the fact that my control tactic didn't work. I've let go of the fact that that's not going to work. Right. So I don't have to emotionally process, well, why didn't that work? Did I not approach the situation the right way? I let it go. Let it go.
Just because I don't get what I want or things don't go the way that I want it to doesn't mean that something better doesn't come right around the corner. So some of my greatest accomplishments were a result of a terrible pain in my life. I almost kind of find a blessing in some of my career negatives where I'm thankful, because if I didn't get that happen to me, then I never would be in the position I'm in now. I never would have had these experiences that we're doing right now. I wouldn't be talking to you right now if it wasn't for a really bad experience. There's this assumption, we go back to assumptions, that bad experiences, you can't gain anything positive from it. I mean, granted, I don't want everybody to experience traumatizing things, in their life, but having the idea that your life is not all about this one trauma. Trauma is not all of who you are, that there are a lot of things of who you are. So when bad things happen, that yes, they suck. We don't want them to happen, but your life is not dictated or stuck. It doesn't have to be, at least. That good things can come. And some of our greatest minds and some of our greatest people in the world, became this way because of these bad events.
Michael Jordan didn't make the JV team at his didn't make the JV basketball team at his high school when he first tried out.
Well, think about like all the traumas that Oprah Winfrey experienced growing up and what she's turned into. I mean, she's got an empire, and she does great work. And it's, but I even think about one of the, we're doing a suicide prevention panel this week. And these are folks that have had tragedy and are using that tragedy to better the world and do some pretty incredible things. So you don't have those opportunities to do those things unless tragedy happens. So although we don't love to have tragedy, we don't want it, we don't ask for it, doesn't box us in and say that you can't have a good life for it.
Failure is an opportunity to grow. Like you were talking about before, conversations are sometimes uncomfortable. Very few good things happen when you don't feel uncomfortable in some way. One of my biggest at the time failures, maybe at this point a little over 3 years ago, I put myself up for a job within the agency, didn't get the job, felt very slighted by that decision. But looking back on it was the absolute best thing that ever happened to me. I had to get honest with myself about who I was and how I was acting, how I was behaving. Did my intentions match my actions? What could I do to have them line up? And then I was given the opportunity that I have now. So without that experience, without that challenge to myself through an external event, that the external event was a challenge, made me feel some type of way about myself. And because I said, I don't know that I like how this feels, I was able to create some changes. I was able to almost lean into the failure to figure out how does something good come out of it.
I attended a training, talk about physical movement and how movement can be healing and things like that. And they always talked about turning into the pain, but not going too far into it. Don't take a bath in it. Don't injure yourself, for it. But to kind of really, you do have to kind of get to that line, move and heal so that you can, kind of move forward. That is certainly a struggle for a lot of people, is to not.
I had to give myself and the people around me like a verbal out loud, like, okay, we are allowed to have feelings about this until Friday. And then when Monday comes, we're moving on. Decisions have been made. We have people to help. It doesn't matter. Move on. Do what you can do with what you have in front of you. And taking the time to be a little salty, to be a little upset, to feel a little hurt, a little rejected, whatever. Without feeling that, I wouldn't have felt uncomfortable enough within myself for opportunities for improvement.
Yeah. And I think about and I experience this a lot where I'm like making these decisions and I'm like, oh, people are going to love this. Like everybody's going to
so wrong,
who could possibly not like this? Yeah. I mean, everybody's going to like this. And then I'm like, make the decision. And then you're like, wait, they didn't like this? What? Like they had an issue with it? What? I don't understand.
Yeah.
And maybe it's because I had these assumptions or beliefs about what I think they need. And I didn't really try to understand it or learn it or get to know, On the other hand, the other thing is that everybody's different. So I can't possibly meet everybody's needs in one decision. So I'm going to make a decision that's going to affect people in different ways. So communication is not going to guarantee.
And the way that we evaluate and make decisions as professionals at the agency is probably very different from how we evaluate and make decisions in our personal life. The amount of people that we have to hypothetically make happy with decisions at the agency is very different from the amount of people that are influenced by our decisions in our home life and our real life. I've had to take some time over the last year to figure out that when evaluating decisions in my personal life, I can't put other people's reactions first. If I'm making a decision about myself and about what I need, I have to put myself first to some extent, because if I'm not happy, if I'm not fulfilled, nobody's really getting the best version of me.
I kind of use a personal example of like COVID hit and we were basically, life was shut down.
And our
And,
brains were shut down every
and,
day at 2 o'clock as we learned what new, fresh hell was awaiting us.
and we had to make some decisions that weren't really fun for employees. And I
No.
said, it has to be what's best in the long run, and we'll recover and we'll figure it out. You know,
Yeah.
this is what we think is best. I know that not everybody's going to like it, and probably people are going to be mad at me for it. I kind of think of it like when I talk to teachers and about kids that are struggling, and I want them to be trauma informed, and I want them to approach it like, well, this kid did this really hurtful thing. What am I going to tell the parents, by not giving them some huge consequence? Well, you can't make decisions based on people's reactions because you're going to be all over the place. You're not going to be doing what's necessarily right. You're going to be doing what you're trying to appease or acquiesce to. That's not what's best for the kid who was aggressive.
And we aren't building any really effective long-term skills when we do that. When we choose how to communicate based on our perceived reactions of other people, we never really figure out how to find our voice.
Right.
And our style of communication, the impact that we want to have on other people. If our decisions are always based on how other people are going to react to them, and that shades our decision making, we've sold ourselves short.
Yeah. So we have to, so basically what we're saying, one aspect of communication is you have to communicate and be willing to tolerate negative reactions.
Mm-hmm.
Or you have to build up a capacity to tolerate those negative reactions. So you have to, to communicate effectively, to be able to communicate with the possibility that you're going to not get the reactions that you want or that are very, fun for you. And so we're going to help you learn how to do that, but that's going to be a necessary step.
I tell clients all the time, because the anxieties and the assumptions and trying to feel prepared when they go into conversations that they know are going to make them feel uncomfortable. There's this kind of desire to play the tape through. And if I say this, what are they going to say? And if I say that, then what am I going to say if they say this? There's this constant trying to map things out. And I'm like, you're spending a lot of effort to try to plan for something that you can't possibly be correct about. So instead of doing that, let's focus on this like it's a paper, like there's a thesis. What do you want to make sure that you communicate with the other person in the context of this conversation? Keep it simple, one or two things, nothing more than that, and make sure that you set the tone that you want to have in the introduction to this conversation with somebody else. Right. Be calm, be in control of your body, be in control of your breath, be in control of your thoughts. If you set the tone at the beginning and kind of what your North Star is with that, with the statement, with the vibe that you wanted to set at the beginning of that, if you feel yourself getting pulled out of your character because something that someone says makes you react, what your North was. You can remind yourself of your North if you can be in control of your body enough to redirect.
Well, and reactive communication is the most challenging and difficult. We talk in collaborative problem solving, planful communication. So we're literally taking a sheet out that has a lot of prompts on it to kind of organize our thoughts. And actually one of the most important things on that organizer is who's having the conversation, where are you having that conversation, when are you having the conversation, and what are you doing while having that conversation? Because those are all really important things. Like, how can I create an environment of safety where people are going to be willing to have this conversation, listen, and try to solve a problem? And that's really
and when you were
important.
talking about permission to communicate, that's something that within the agency and the group of supervisors that I work with closely on a day-to-day basis, we're trying to do a better job about asking for permission before we communicate with other people, just by asking this simple question of, hey, I have something I need to talk to you about. It's probably going to take about 10 minutes. Time now? Do you have brain space now? Do you have the ability now? Or do you want to wait? It's absolutely not earth shattering. You let me know what you need. And just that simple amount of respect that we give to other people.
Right. Well, and I always think
in and of itself can create safety.
Right. And I always think it's kind of this assumption we carry in a world that our emergency is everybody else's emergency. So I remember having a therapy group where a client was really upset at our front desk, and we went down this road, and we basically she got to this point where she's like, oh yeah, my emergency is not her emergency. So even though I really wanted this, it couldn't, that's not her responsibility. And so, that's, the expectations we put on other people without their knowledge. Like my expectation I put on you is that you're going to drop everything that you're doing, regardless of how important or unimportant it is, and tend to me. And then if you don't, then there's something wrong with you. And that can get us into a lot of trouble. So I think this is a good kind of start to communication, because I think it's an important topic, and I think it was a good. I'm hoping that people that are listening kind of can relate to a lot of the things that we're talking about, because I feel like this is not just solely something we experience, but everybody experiences to some degree. We're going to continue to kind of go down this communication road and talk about different issues in future segments.
We as human beings are built to need connection with other humans.
Yeah.
If you can't communicate effectively, how can you get that biological connection with another person? It's so important for our ability to be biologically regulated.
Well, and I think if someone listening can take one piece of this that we talked about today and apply it, what are the great positive things that can happen? Like, even if someone just focuses on, okay, how am I going to have these conversations with people? Like, what things will I think of and plan? So just being able to kind of do those things, because ultimately we want to be able to be effective at communicating, and we want to shoot for a positive outcome. So we want to do it in a way that people are going to be more receptive. I always tell people, like, what is the best way that they're going to be more receptive to what you have to say? You have all these great things that you want to say, but they're not receptive to you because of the way you're approaching them. So how can you communicate in a way that the person's going to be more receptive to you?
Is to have the other person
be receptive.
Tolerate listening to your point, and be willing to invest in understanding the point that you're trying to make.
Give it some value to think about, and to see if it'll work, in that situation. So thank you for spending time via Zoom as we are COVID living. So hopefully we'll get to a place where we don't really have to do that, because I'm sure people are Zoom tired, but we'll see if we can kind of move forward in that. So thank you.